Good early evening, everyone. Hi. My name is Leslie John, and I am a colleague of Mike Norton's, and I am so excited to be here with you today, celebrating the launch of his forthcoming book, The Ritual Effect. From Habit to Ritual, Harness the Surprising Power of Everyday Actions. So here's what's on the agenda today. First of all, we're going to have a special musical presentation by a band called The Lights. More on that in a moment. Then we will hear from the man himself. Mike is going to come and give us a talk about his book. And finally, Mike will saunter over and have a fireside chat with our esteemed colleague, Arthur Brooks. Arthur is the author of 13 books, including his most recent one entitled Build the Life You Want, which is co-authored with none other than Oprah Winfrey and is a New York Times #1 bestseller. But first, I'd like to introduce our special musical guest, The Lights. The Lights is a band of 5, and it features 3 HBS faculty members, including, of course, Mike Norton, but also Alison Brooks and Ryan Buell. Woo-woo! And here's a passage from Mike's book about it, which gives us a little bit of insight into some of the ways that they manage their pre-performance anxiety, some of the rituals they engage in, and the diverse ways that they cope with it. So here's what he says. Several years ago, we formed the imaginatively named Harvard faculty band, we're now called The Lights. Playing publicly in a band gives all 3 of us direct access to performance anxiety. Allison is the least nervous performer I have ever played music with. She lives out her research by reframing all those butterflies and jitters as excitement, and I think it's happening right now. Ryan's anxiety on stage tends to manifest in the form of audience patter. I, on the other hand, tend to reframe my performance anxiety as inconvenience. Why does being in a band mean we have to stand up in front of people and play music? Luckily, the band tolerates me. I love this excerpt for many reasons, including that you can really feel Mike's voice in it. You can feel his understated, self-deprecating, snarky style. So to counteract that, let's have an exuberant and enthusiastic welcome to The Lights. Come on in. Too late.
You get to watch all of Mike's descriptions live in real time.
It's fine. Taking chances on the summer night, and I don't know where it's going. If we do this, then let's do it right. 'Cause my confidence is growing. Whatever you want, I'll be. Just say the word, baby. Put your arm away. You're safe. So pull the match and light the fuse. Leave the past behind. Trade our plans for dancing shoes. See what we can find. Whatever you want, I'll be. Just say the word, baby. Put your arm away. You're safe with me. Can we talk until the sun goes down? Tell me everything you know. Let me turn your body all around. Say the word and let's go.
Thank you all so much for being here. This is a real treat for us. You might not be able to tell, but Mike doesn't do a lot of, like the touchy-feely stuff. This is where we get to experience the mushy Mike Norton is inside of the music. And he asked us to be here for this event, which is really cool. So thank you all for being here and sharing with us. And just in case you were curious, this song that we're about to sing is a Mike Norton original.
Is that good or bad?
We'll see. We'll find out. They'll tell us.
Upright piano was tuned to the wails of the wind that wore down the sandstone landscapes in soft muted hue, dried in the late summer sun. Dance with Saint Matthew in my black and white dream. Dreams ended before they begun. They were done. And the boat threw us in to the ravenous sea. So I started for shore as it started to sink.
Thanks.
What was that?
That's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
That's all I'm going to say. That's not all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
I lost a bet. But hello, everybody. Thank you for coming.
This next song is written by Mr. Ryan Buell, standing to my left here, and he's also going to sing it for us. Embrace him gently in your collective warmth, please.
I need your warmth.
Yeah, let's go! Bang! No.
No, I was really close. This is a song about how we keep moving on. Distracted, restless evening, dreadful dreams, they say it's time. You burn the coffee, I bite my tongue. No holding off this great out day. Fog slips away, and every little thing goes wrong. Every little thing goes wrong. And every little thing goes wrong. But we're all right. But we're all right.
We're all
And so I tried to write it down, all these things we said and are, to help us make it through today. Sorrow's love turned around, past joy rebounds, we laugh, we smile. I know, you know, we know we'll be okay.
Every little thing goes wrong. Every little thing goes wrong.
Thank you.
That's Professor Ryan Buell.
Professor Ryan Buell. We've got one more song for you. Thank you again for being here. It ain't easy, but it ain't hard. Learning how to be ones to go so far. Together so much better than apart. Step up, step out and make your move. Don't just leave her, do your part. Take the time to show that you'll always raise the bar. Staying quiet's not the way to a heart. Speak up, speak out and make your move. A little bit goes a long way. A little bit will do just fine. A little bit goes a long way. It's only a matter of time. Sure is easy, sure is hard. Learning how to be the ones to go so far. Together so much better than apart. Step up, step out, find your groove. Speak up, speak out and make your move. Hey! When the world gets too hard to navigate, just turn around and stare into her eyes. Take a breath and let that worry dissipate. The sooner you do, the sooner you will realize. A little bit goes a long way. A little bit will do just fine. A little bit goes a long way. It's only a matter of time. A little bit goes a long way. A little bit will do just fine. A little bit goes a long way. Only a matter of time. A little bit goes a long way. A little bit will do just fine. A little bit goes a long way. It's only a matter of time. It's only a matter of time. It's only a matter of
So this is an interesting day. I did a little band thing, and then I was going to do a wardrobe change, and then I realized I don't have any other wardrobe, so I just had to stay in the same clothing. But to start us off, I'm going to need everybody to stand up. And then sit back down. No, that's a joke. That was a joke. That was a joke. Okay, stay standing. Okay, that's it. You've been great. Have a good night. So, take a seat. I like to do that, and I like to look at people's faces while I do that, because there's a wide range of emotions that come onto people's faces. First, people think, they look around like, I don't know if he wants us to do this, or he didn't say to do it, but I don't know why else he would have put it up. And then one person's like, about this, and then other people say, I guess we should all be doing this. So there's awkwardness, and then acceptance, I guess. And then people will kind of get into it a little bit, and a little bit start to sync up with the people around them. But you hear pockets, like those people are at that speed, those people are at that speed, these people are doing something different. There's always one person who insists on being different than everybody else in the way that they do it. But one thing you see is you see people look at each other and smile, like, hey, we're doing it at the same time, this is great. And then you see them hear somebody clap at the wrong time, and they look very mad. Like, very mad. Why are those people doing it that way? My way is obviously the good way, because here we are over here doing it together. If they're doing it differently, they must be doing it wrong. And I think that is part of the, and by the way, by the end, you kind of almost all synced up. The last let's go was probably 80% together. And that almost always happens as well. You get this random walk, and then at the end, finally, people say, let's go together. And I sometimes have the feeling after the last let's go that if I ran out of the auditorium and said, follow me, people would be like, sure, let's go. He's got us going right now. So if you think about, obviously, why I made you do this, it's a ritual that I made up. It doesn't have any history particularly. When you did it, you had lots of different emotions about it. It can be pretty energizing. It can be pretty bonding, actually, with people around you. You certainly feel differently now that you did that than if you hadn't done that. But I'll also come back to this idea that it's not just feeling good about our little group. It can also be, there's a downside, which is those other people, I didn't like the way that they were doing it. And we'll come back to that as well, that rituals can be really, really great and really positive, and also have these other sorts of negative effects that we have to watch out for. One of my favorite quotes from George Carlin is this, which I think is, that's how you felt a little bit, is like, they're going too fast, or we're going too slow, we should speed up. And of course, there's no correct speed. It's just whatever you're doing feels like the right sort of speed. And that could be the same thing that we feel sometimes with rituals as well. So first question, usually I get asked, like, what do you even mean by ritual? I don't mean people in robes with candles chanting and things like that. That's not usually the kind that I study. I study more ones that are a little bit every day, and I'll show you lots of examples of that as we go. So question for you, if you think about your morning, like when you're getting ready to leave the house or when you're getting ready for bed at night, do you brush your teeth and then take a shower, or do you shower and then brush your teeth? So raise your hand if you brush your teeth and then take a shower. And now raise your hand if you take a shower and then brush your teeth. So one of the weirdest things in my entire career is it's almost always exactly 50-50 in any audience, like all over the world. So humans have not decided what is the good order to brush your teeth or shower. We seem to be very deeply divided on this. But these are just kind of things that you do. By the way, I know some of you are like, well, I do them at the same time. And that is disgusting. So don't ever do that again. All right, another question for you. Think in your mind if tonight or tomorrow morning, if I said, flip the order of them. So if you're a brush teeth, take a shower person, imagine and really think about how you'd feel if you had to shower and then brush your teeth. And same, if you're a shower and then brush your teeth person, think about how you might feel if you had to brush your teeth and then shower. This is another one where I can watch the audience, and some people are like, I don't know why he's asking me this, and other people literally start to squirm in their seat, like, I don't know about that one. And so about half of people, it bugs them, and about half of people, they say, doesn't bother me at all. In fact, raise your hand if that didn't bother you at all, the idea of flipping them. And raise your hand if it bugged you, but you don't know why. Yeah, it's about 50-50 in the world as well. And for me, that's one of the ways to think about the difference between habits and rituals. So if you're somebody, like cleaning yourself is the thing that we all have to do, it's a good habit to have, good hygiene is good. But the order doesn't matter to you. You got to brush your teeth, you got to shower. Who cares? I can do them in any order I want. Those are a little bit closer to habits. They're kind of tasks that you need to do every day, but you don't feel much about them. But then for half of you, you thought, and often what people say is, I just don't want to. And if I say, why? Like, well, is there an optimal way to do it? They say, no, I just don't want to flip them if I don't have to flip them. And that for you has become a little bit more of a ritual. Not ritual like people in robes with candles chanting, that's like further out, but a little bit now suddenly it matters to you the order in which you do it, or the time at which you do it, or the specific toothpaste that you have. We all start to build in things to our morning routines, and that's when they become a little bit more ritualistic. And again, when people do it in their preferred way, they say, I feel ready for the day, I feel ready to go, I feel really good. And if it gets disrupted, like for example, if you have children who mess up the thing, you can also say, I felt off all day because I had to brush my teeth at the wrong time. So they can be great when we enact them the way we like, and also they can also disrupt us sometimes. And I think the idea of habits and rituals is, I think of habits as kind of the what. It's the things that we do, but there's not a lot of emotion to them, really. It's just stuff that we have to get done. But rituals are this kind of subtle thing about it's how we do things. The way that we do things is very different from person to person. Sometimes really, really subtle, but really there, we can see it. And for some people, how they do things becomes extremely important in imbuing that with meaning. And it isn't just, of course, brushing your teeth and showering. We'll talk about lots of different examples in life of where this can happen. But I think about it as habits sort of, they're good if they automate us, meaning like you do it every day, you don't think about it, and that's fantastic, but they're a little bit like you're a robot in the end. If you think about a life of perfect habits, like imagine every day you had perfect habits all day, every day for 40 years, I think you might look back at your life and, like, I'm sure you'd be super healthy and have great teeth and everything like that, but you might say that wasn't really a very rich and interesting life that I led. You know, people would say, hey, why don't we go out for a drink? And you'd say, I can't, I have to run at 6 p.m. every day, I'm sorry. You probably end up divorced as well if you have perfect habits because you don't have any flexibility in what you're doing. Rituals sometimes are these things that they're a little out of the ordinary, but they fill our lives with richness and make them a little bit more interesting than they might be otherwise. So I started studying this, of all things, reading a book by the former president of Harvard, Drew Gilpin-Faust, who's an historian. When I started studying this, actually, she was still the president, and I did not have tenure. And so people thought that I was showing this just to, like, kiss up, basically, and see if she would be like, oh, he must be good. But I promise it wasn't that. It just was a fascinating book about death in the American Civil War. And one of the things that she showed is that there's kind of unprecedented grief, especially in the American South. So people lost not just one family member, but many family members. And the question was, what did people do in the face of this new grief? How did people cope? And she showed that, so we know, in some cultures we can see there's some cultures you wear black when you're grieving. In other cultures you might wear white when you're grieving. If you flip them and do the wrong color in the wrong culture, it's very offensive. One of my favorite things, this is from a estate planning website, and this is like advice to the person who's grieving on the specific colors you should wear and which ones you should not wear, including like the accent versus the primary color. What she shows in her research is that in the American South, women came up with new clothing rituals. In other words, they had standard ones that they did, like black for this period of time, but because there was so much grief, it was like something else needs to be done. And so what they ended up doing was they would wear black for a period of time, and then gray for a period of time, and then still gray, but you could add a color like a lavender ribbon. And then you could go back to dressing the way you usually dressed. It wasn't written down anywhere. There wasn't any history of that. It's not like people got together and said, let's do lavender ribbon. It just emerged from the culture in the face of this grief. And what was so fascinating to me as a psychologist is the amount of time that you went through each phase depended on how close you were to the person. So I don't have the numbers exactly right, but if it was your husband, it was a year in black, a year in gray, then lavender. And if it was your third cousin, it was a month and a month and a month. Amazing. I mean, very carefully calibrated to how sad we might think we are and how we use clothing and color to help us through that. So this is like evidence to me that we think of rituals that, the people in robes with candles, we think of them often as rituals are the things that we inherit. They're religious rituals, they're cultural rituals, they're from the past, and we're enacting them today. And they are for sure that. And those rituals can be incredibly helpful and meaningful in our lives. When we're grieving, for example, we use these rituals to bond with other people and get through it. Except when we started studying rituals, if we ask somebody, we'll think of somebody you lost, what did you do? What people would say is, well, we did a funeral, or whatever their faith was, it lasted 1 day, 5 days, it lasted a month, whatever it might be. But then they would say, but I also did something else, very often. And it would often be something very specific to the person that they lost. This is someone in one of our surveys who we said, what did you do? We didn't say, what ritual did you do? We just said, what did you do to cope? And this person said, I washed a loved one's car once a week, just as they had done while alive. You can see exactly what's happening. Obviously, this person's spouse had a car that they loved, that they really took care of. This person decided to honor them by continuing to wash the car every single week. Now, there's no 1,000-year-old text that says it is appropriate to wash the car of the person you lost, because of course there weren't cars 1,000 years ago, but this woman came up with this ritual herself. Other people do things like, I listen to my mom's favorite song every day, every morning, going to work for a week, for a year, things like that. And this is often what these rituals that we come up with do. We have the important cultural and religious ones, but we're still grieving after those are over. After a funeral, it's not like you snap your fingers and now you feel fine, you're not grieving. You're still grieving. We see that people will come up with their own ways of continuing to cope with their grief on a continuous way rather than just, here's the funeral and now we're done. And we see that in lots of different domains, actually. So a little bit happier domain of rituals and relationships. So when people get married, in nearly every culture, there's a ceremony. Often there's rings exchanged. Amazing. We call this finger the ring finger. Like, you could use it for anything you want in the world, but it shows how important rings are in marriage that we literally named it that. Like, the middle finger is called the middle finger. It's very helpful. It's in the middle. Ring finger is like, how am I supposed to know what's the... Kids are like, what? What's the ring finger? But that shows we reserve an entire finger for this, for rings on our finger. And again, you've got the wedding, and they're very lovely and things like that, but the wedding is a day, the honeymoon might be a week, and then you're married for like 50 years. So what do you do for the rest of the 50 years? You've got your anniversary once a year, but what do couples do in the meantime? We ask them that as well, like what do you do to show each other that you love each other? And they say things like this. This person said, when we kiss, we do it in threes. Not sure why this started, but after 22 years, it feels really weird if it is not in threes. And this person's my favorite. They say, when my partner and I eat dinner, we always clink our silverware together. Amazing. If you think about what's more boring than a fork? It's just a thing to put a thing. They've turned it into something that's really meaningful to them. Quick clink, and then they eat their meal. And we see that when couples have rituals like this, they tend to be more satisfied in their relationships. There's some signal in these little actions that we might do. And what's nice about so many of them is they're daily or they're weekly. They're more often, they're more common, and so we can kind of build these bonds a little bit more instead of just, I guess, Valentine's Day maybe, and then our anniversary. Culture reminds us to do it, but we can also do it ourselves. Another domain where this comes up a lot is rituals and parenting. So when you become a new parent, if any of you have become a new parent, what they do is they give you a human, and they're just like, good luck with that. And you have to leave and go home, and you have to deal with a new human. And there's like ceremonies and rituals there too, like we have baptism. There's things that culture has given us as well to get social support. But in the end, as a parent, it's like, it's a day-to-day thing, right? What am I going to do every day? And we see lots and lots of parents come up with rituals, and in particular, you can see parents come up with rituals around sleep. And now it is very interesting to me when people have kids, because I can ask them, what are you doing at nighttime? And they have these, they're like, well, what we started to do at first was, and they say, but now what we do is, and they have these incredibly elaborate sequences of behaviors, like, well, we sing this song, and then we have to read this book, Then we do a little quick bath thing, but then we have to play this song. We have to get this stuffy and then that stuffy to make sure that these are in this particular orientation. And then what we need to do is also this and this. And then they say, and if we do it wrong, we have to start all over, because if we don't do it right, the baby's not going to sleep. And you see couples do this like very, very frequently. And of course, it's unclear if it helps the baby sleep, but it's certainly helping us feel like we have some sense of control over what's happening in our lives. And we see parents even turning to rituals, for example, like one thing that is very stressful is bringing a kid home. Another one is during the pandemic. So we did research to ask parents what they were doing during the pandemic. And one thing that they do is they turn to rituals. They actually, even if they had rituals before with their kids, they actually add more during COVID as a way to kind of insert some regularity in the face of all this chaos. I love this one, a 10-minute silly moment, to take 10 minutes of our day to be silly and laugh to get out all of the wiggles. You could do that at any point. You don't need anything to happen in the world to start saying, every day at this time we're going to take 10 minutes and be silly. But when something happens, it prompts us often to say, let's start a ritual, let's do this, and make sure that we continue to enact it. And the more you do those over time, the more meaningful they can become. At this point, some of you are still saying, maybe those of you that don't have kids are probably still saying, oh, I don't do that. I don't have any rituals. That was sort of how I felt about my own life when I started studying them. Like, this is for new agey millennials or something, whatever they're up to, but not for me. But I'll ask you a couple questions about what you might have done in your life. So, have you ever been sitting at a table and over there somewhere, people have made a cake? And they very carefully frosted the cake. Like, it has to be very beautifully frosted, this cake, okay? And you're sitting here. And you can eat the cake. Everybody's like, let's eat some cake. Cake is good. And then they say, okay, but before we eat the cake, let's put candles in it. Smash some candles in it. And then let's make sure we light the candles on fire so that the wax drips all over the cake. And then let's bring the cake over to you. And while we bring it over to you, let's sing a very tuneless, extremely slow song that no one is singing correctly, like like that. Then let's put it in front of you. And then what we should do before we eat it is, because this is what we like to do with food, why don't you blow all over it? And then we'll take the candles out and eat the wax and spit in the cake thing. And that's going to be like a nice way to eat the cake instead of the other way. And of course, I'm exaggerating, but obviously that's birthday cake. It's a crazy ceremony that many of us have engaged in our lives. But it's not crazy, right? I mean, if you just put a cake there, then I don't know if it's my birthday or not. We invent these things to bring us together to do something to make it more fun. The number of candles in and of itself tells us, like, you're moving from that age to this age. It's a big deal, and we use cake to do that. Another one that I really like too, this is for, again, people who are skeptical, is have you ever been like thirsty and you wanted to drink something? So you put some liquid in a glass, and then other people do as well. And then before you drink the liquid, you're like, you know what we should do? Let's take it up like this, like hold it out like this. And I have an idea. Why don't we whack our glasses together and yell something? And everybody's like, oh my God, that's such a good idea. We should totally, totally do that. And in all cultures across the world, you see there's a phrase that people do when they whack the glasses together. It's like it spills, maybe you like spill mine into yours, doesn't make a lot of sense. Except these phrases often mean something like life or luck or health. So we're taking liquid in a glass or a cake and building a lot of meaning into it that really, in the end, matters to us. And rituals actually allow us to take really boring, mundane things, like showering and brushing teeth, or our silverware, or even something like liquid in a glass, and build enormous meaning and value into it. And for me, that's why they're so exciting, actually, because we can use them in different ways in our lives. Marketers, unfortunately, have gotten on this kick. So there's like 19 brands now that are called Ritual something or other. You may have used them. There's like skincare, non-alcoholic something. There's other ritual ones. They know that we like that word, and so they've been sort of selling us these sorts of things. The Stella one is amazing because it's almost like religious in its connotations, even though, of course, it's just okay, so at some point, typically when I give talks, people are like, this guy works at a business school? It's like a very common question, like, what does this have to do with anything, about anything? So sometimes I'm like, well, we should study this at work also. So we did a lot of research on how we use rituals in our work lives, in addition to our romantic lives and our parenting lives and things like that. The way we use rituals when we perform is like completely fascinating, even thinking of what we just did up here. Before a big thing happens, something happens to us where we get very, very nervous, and we need to do something with that. Sometimes we like take medication. We can do all kinds of things to deal with the nerves, but what you see people doing very, very often is turning to ritual. Does anybody know who this person is? Nadal. Rafael Nadal. This is, by the way, only part of his pre-serve ritual. And by the way, it's before every single serve. He doesn't do this before the match and then he's fine. Every single serve he does this exact thing, including he just decided like, well, I don't need to do this on the second serve, obviously. I could just do it on the first serve. Amazing that he just decided to do this. He says, it's something I don't need to do, but when I do it, it means I'm focused. And GQ said the most famous underwear adjuster in history, because one of the things that he does, this is a professional athlete who is widely admired, he picks his wedgie every time before he serves. We don't usually allow other people to do that, so with performers who are really elite, they can get away with really like outstanding, crazy things that we would never allow. If I did that before I started teaching, people would be like, what the? You're not allowed to do that, right? But when the stress is that high, we actually allow people to engage in these sorts of behaviors. But it doesn't mean we don't do them ourselves. So another quick guess for you. Anybody know who this is? This one's harder. It's Jack Donaghy. Looking at himself in the mirror to psych himself up and yelling at himself. If you ask people, what do you do at work before a big meeting? Many, many people say, well, you know what I do? I go into the bathroom, I make sure no one's in there, and then I talk to myself in the mirror. It's like a super common thing that humans do. And you say, either out loud or in your head, you're like, you can do this, you've got this. Which feels normal because we've done it our whole lives, but actually, again, is a very strange thing that we've decided to do. If you actually think about this, when you're talking to yourself in your head, like, you can do this, or I got this, do you say, think about what you say. Do you say, you can do this, or do you say, I can do this? So raise your hand if you say, you can do this. And then raise your hand if you say, I can do this. So this is another one of these weird 50-50 things. I actually don't know what's going on. I don't even have a point to just saying that. I just think it's amazing that some of us have decided to be like you, and others of us have been like I. Because if you say, you can do this, who's talking? If you really stop and think about it, like your brain is yelling at you or something like that. So, but again, behaviors that don't seem to make much sense, but when you're so nervous right before something happens, we don't have a good solution. We don't have a magical solution where you can do something and feel calm. So one of the things we do in these situations, not as stressful as Nadal, but even for ourselves, we try to turn to rituals to see if we can get that sense of calm. Another domain that we've looked at with rituals at work is in our teams. This is the haka that the New Zealand All Blacks started doing before their matches. It's a little bit similar to, I'm not gonna make you do it again, but it's a little bit similar to what I had you do. We're all doing this thing together. It's somewhat physical. Do these things do anything for us or not? They're quite common that teams have rituals like this. We ask people at work, what does your team do? Does your team do anything regularly that's important or special? And they don't say things like, we all stomp and clap. That's not what happens in the world. But they say things like this. This is one team that said, every day my team and I order in lunch from a local restaurant. We cycle 5 restaurants per week with 1 restaurant per day. Since there are 5 of us, each of us gets to pick a restaurant 1 day per week. I'm Monday, T is Tuesday, D is Wednesday, and so on. We always pay our share of the total of the order. We eat in the conference room, and it's nice because it breaks the monotony by making a regular lunch break exciting. It's not like the haka, but you can see that for this group, like, again, all they're having is lunch. Like, silverware is just silverware. All their cake is just cake. All they're doing is having lunch. They're gonna have lunch anyway, but they turned this into, by doing it regularly, something that bonds them together. And of course, not everybody does. This is a guy who just wrote, I don't participate in any such activity. I do my work, then go home. And you can think of your people you work with who are that person, and I'm sorry that you have them, because we all do. But then we ask people questions like this: how meaningful is your job to you? And teams that say we have something that we do together, not only do they say that thing is meaningful, like the lunch thing is meaningful to me, but a little bit it carries over into how meaningful they see their job. So there's something about when we engage in these small little practices, not stomping and clapping, but small practices together that do something for us that's a little bit elusive otherwise. I'm not going to make you do that again, I promise. But I told you that, and the George Carlin quote says that sometimes rituals can divide us instead of unite us. So we've done research with a very similar ritual like this. But imagine I had all of you do this part up to now, all together. But then some of you I secretly said, do the thing you did before. And some of you I said, do this. So these people are like, yeah, we got it. We're the let's go people. And then you hear from over here these idiots saying yeehaw. And these people are like, let's go. This is a yeehaw thing. We can see in our research that, yes, these rituals can bind us together. But also, we don't just think they're good, we think they're right. And when our rituals become right, it means that other people's can be wrong, and we can have very negative reactions to that as well. This is a trivial example, but of course you can think in the world, the ways in which differences in ritual can be a source of bonding, but these differences can also really drive people apart. When we do work with companies, like sometimes we'll have them design rituals within companies, we're always trying to think about if a team develops their own little ritual, it's nice for them, but is it going to make them think the other teams are all idiots? So how do we balance that tension between the benefits of rituals bonding and the risk that they can push people away? The final domain that we looked at in work is with work-life balance. How do people separate work self from home self? So we got to do it a couple times a day, right? We have home self, then we need to do work self, and then after work we need to go back to home self. So how do I go from like personal me to professional me to personal me again? Again, people do many, many things to try to help with that transition, but one of the things that people turn to is rituals. We did some research with emergency room nurses in North Carolina. I think emergency room nurse has to be one of the most stressful jobs in history. I mean, it's an incredibly stressed, very long shift, incredibly stressful. Very hard to leave work behind at the end of the day, given how emotional it is. Many, many of these nurses, when we say, what do you do at the end of the day? They tell us things like this. So this person says, after clocking out for the day, I consciously take my badge off and put it in my work bag. As I do this, I tell myself I'm finished, and I think about how I'm done being responsible for my patients for the day. When showering after work, I must imagine the entire hospital turning into liquid and circling down the drain. After the hospital goes down the drain, I can no longer think about the events, good or bad, of that day. On the one hand, very unusual thing to do. On the other hand, when I read that, I think that feels like it might actually, maybe I should try that. This kind of cleansing and circling, and then it's gone. Another nurse did something very similar, but he said that the only difference for his was that he brought a beer into the shower and would drink the beer as he imagined the thing, which could be an improvement. I can't really endorse that, but thinking about how we use these to break our days apart. And the final area that we've looked at actually is working from home, which kind of happened to us in a way during COVID, but also just keeps increasing this idea that we work from home. Working from home, the research said, there's all sorts of benefits, obviously, to working from home. I'm not against working from home, but it does create a problem, which is how do we separate our personal self from our professional self if we're not going to different places anymore or have a commute or something? We're literally in the exact same room when we're supposed to be home self and professional self. So what do people do? They turn to rituals again here. And there's amazing examples of what people did during the lockdown. We do see that when people do these rituals, it helps them unwind, decompress, separate work from home. This is someone who's had to work from home during COVID. So this columnist said, I'm hungry for ritual. Every day I get dressed, put on shoes, make coffee, pour it in a mug, and tell my two housemates that I'm heading to work and we'll see them later. Then I walk in a few circles and settle in at a desk in the corner of our living room, just a couple feet away. It's how I help my bleary mind realize that my workday has begun. Another guy who used to bike to work would get in his bedroom. He would come out of his bedroom with his biking gear on, get on his bike down the hall, get off his bike, take his biking gear off, put his work clothes on, and go into a room. And at the end of the day, he would come out of the room, put his biking clothes on, bike down the hallway again, and go back into his room. Either you can say that guy has really, really lost it, or you can say, compared to what? you know, what else is he supposed to do to try to separate his home self from his work self? These are things that we often turn to try to make these things happen. So in the little time I have left, so I started with this kind of what is a ritual. This is one of these topics where when you study it for a while, you definitely start to lose your mind because everything starts to look like a ritual. And we've looked in so many different domains of life at how these rituals play roles, positive and negative, in our lives. There's also just more to come because we keep discovering new domains each and every time. So the last thing you can do is, if you want to know if you're a high ritual person or a low ritual person, we have a little quiz that we developed. So you can take it, and it's especially fun to have your partner take it so that you can compare and probably insult them if you did better or worse on them on the quiz. So thank you all so much. I really appreciate it.
Hey. Oprah Winfrey's not here. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
That was terrific.
Thanks so much.
It's great. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Arthur Brooks. I am also a professor here at the Harvard Business School. And I had the incredible opportunity to read this book 6 months ago when it was just being finished and going to press. And I got to give an endorsement of this book, but I also became a real believer in this book. And so I want to take a little bit of time right now to guide Mike in a discussion about some questions that are on my mind that might be on yours as well. So we're going to take about 25 minutes. We've promised that all of you are going to get out by 6:30 so you can go home and have the ritual of dinner with your families. In the meantime, as I get into my questions of Mike, we've got mics here. And if any of you wants to get in on the discussion, stand behind one of these mics, and I will stop my questioning and I will turn to you. But in the meantime, I want to get started. You talk about the coronavirus epidemic as kind of this laboratory for rituals. And I remember this thing, you know, what I most remember of the coronavirus epidemic was not how terrible it was, although it was for so many people. It was that it was the last year with my little girl before she went to college. And she was suffering because we all were, and especially young people. And every night after dinner, we would wash up the dishes, and then we would go walk for a mile, just the two of us. Usually we didn't talk. And it would take 20 minutes, and it was cold because it's Massachusetts. And now she talks about that a lot. She remembers that. And she's a junior in college now, and in Providence. And sometimes she'll go out for a mile walk after dinner. And she remembers that time. And I didn't know what it was exactly. I didn't understand the sweetness, the depth of that till I read your book. So here's my question. You talked about how you wrote this book. Why did you write it?
For your daughter.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think one thing that we saw with COVID was that it disrupted really all of our rituals. So people who had weddings planned, they would postpone the wedding or try to do it online or something. So we don't say, well, we can't do the ritual, let's just not do it. We say, we need to do something. That's really in us as humans to say, we got to do something, though. We can't just let it go. Funerals as well, you know, people said we need to do something like this. So they're disruptive, but they're also opportunities because we create new things, new opportunities that we didn't think of before. So you may remember the people would go out on their balcony and applaud for first responders, which is not a thing that we had done before, but it's an amazingly lovely thing to do where we're not allowed to be around each other, but we can still clap and bond in that way. And we saw lots of families come up because the boredom was so profound because you couldn't see anybody else except each other. I'm one of 5 kids, and if lockdown had happened when we were kids, we would have murdered each other, no doubt. A lot of time together, but also these things where now we actually have time, where we can go for a walk together every single day. And sometimes what's interesting is people continue to do it after, and then sometimes they kind of drift away a little bit and we go back to what we were doing before, but you still get the memory. You'll always have that time with your daughter in a way that maybe you wouldn't have done it quite in that way unless the world had prompted the two of you to do it. So I wrote the book honestly because I just kept seeing them everywhere. that was really the, almost like in the movie, I'm not a genius, but in the movie A Beautiful Mind, with all the like things on the wall and everything's connected, that's how I feel about rituals, is it's sort of like this. They're just everywhere around us, and I really had a reaction to thinking of rituals as only the received ones, or the cultural ones, or religious ones, and not these other kind as well. Because the cultural and religious ones, again, enormously important in our lives. They really give us a lot of meaning. But I liked this kind that we're bubbling up all the time in our own lives that we could create ourselves. And that's really what got me hooked on studying it, is you saw in all of these domains, people do the standard one, and then they freelance kind of on the side. And those are the ones that I thought were so interesting.
Just sort of home-brewed sacraments.
For
in
sure.
their own way. We have a lot of research that shows that the human brain is wired for habitual behavior. And there's all kinds of reasons for that. Habits are an incredibly economical way for us to do things that are good for us. Unfortunately, they also help us to do things that are really bad for us, and then they're hard to break. But there's a ton of neuroscience research on the wiring of the brain for habits. Is the human brain wired for rituals?
We don't know, is the short answer. But when you look at, if you think of how you would decide something is kind of fundamentally human or not, one way you look at is it present across cultures? And ritual is just in every culture, in many ways, but certainly, if you think of marriage and funerals and things like this, it's just present. And it's also present, the other way to think about it is through history. So have humans always been doing this, or is it a new thing? Humans have always been doing this. In fact, if you think about the way that we know a culture was a culture, is often the only evidence we have is if there was ceremonial burial. That's how we know, because like dinosaurs didn't arrange the bones of the dinosaurs that died and put like flowers on them, because they're dinosaurs. But humans do that, right? They take treasured objects and they bury people, and then we know that they were in fact a group that had some sort of culture together. So you see this like from the beginning, like Gilgamesh has rituals in it. The beginning of human history all the way to today, they're always there. And we turn to them, I think the final test is, are they ubiquitous? Do we only use them for one little thing, or do we use them for lots of things? And rituals we use for like every problem we face in life. We use them at funerals when we're sad. We use them at weddings when we're very happy. We use them sometimes to get super amped up. We use them to try to calm ourselves down. So we're very flexibly pulling on them for all these different tasks in life. And that again says to me there's something deeply human about them, because they're everywhere around us, and we turn to them as a solution for all of these different problems.
I teach a course here at Harvard Business School on happiness, and one of the things that we talk about is the fact that happiness isn't a feeling. It's a combination of enjoyment and satisfaction and meaning. And so the happiest people are the people who have those macronutrients in balance and abundance. People endow certain activities with meaning by ritualizing them, right? Is it your view that, in fact, meaning becomes more salient in people's lives because of the rituals that are attached to a particular activity?
I think one thing that's extraordinary about rituals is you can think of meaning as kind of my place in the universe, but you can also think of meaning as, are the things I'm doing day to day meaningful or just random stuff? And I had you do this brush your teeth or shower kind of thing, which order do you do it in? And people will sometimes say that there's meaning in it when they do it their way. Meaning. I mean, meaning is a very big word. Like, we all want meaning in our lives. But even with these little things, they say, it's kind of meaningful to me that I do it in this way. Or people will say, I always have coffee, first every single morning. Or I always bring coffee to my significant other every single morning. It's just coffee. It's just liquid in a cup. It's all it is, really. But people build enormous meaning into it. Like, it means something about our relationship.
Yeah.
It means, people will say, I talked to a journalist who said, I don't do any rituals at all. And I said, well, in the morning, like, what do you do? And she said, I have tea. And I said, well, tell me about it. What's the tea? And she said, well, it's just tea. I just drink tea. And I said, well, what mug do you use? And she laughed. And she said, oh my God, I always use the exact same mug. And I said, well, what mug is it? And she said, I got it my daughter and I went to see elephant seals giving birth. And we bought this mug at that time, and I've used it every day ever since. And she said, last week my husband brought me tea in a different mug, and I was like, take it away. You know, I need this mug. It's a mug, it's tea, you know, the most mundane things, but for her it's this memory of this time with her daughter. I mean, literally seeing life created while she's with her daughter that she created. That's what's so exciting about it to me, is that these small things can become something.
It's a recreation of the moment of meaning for her. A little cup of tea suddenly is more significant.
Exactly.
You talk about rituals as almost everybody has them, whether they're conscious of that or not. Do you believe that some people use them more intensively than others? Some people, no. Do you believe that some people need rituals more than others?
Do you want me to rank everyone in the audience for how much they need them?
No, but I'm going to ask you a
This
follow-up.
guy
Yeah.
needs them. No, I'm only kidding.
I'm going to ask you a follow-up question that does something like that in a second. Unless you tell me no, everybody has an equal need for rituals, but I don't think you believe that, do you?
No, I mean, if you think of something like on the clinical end of the spectrum, if you think of something like obsessive compulsive disorder, which is things beyond just ritualistic behavior, but part of obsessive compulsive disorder does have this kind of ritualistic tendency where you're doing the same thing repeatedly. One of the things that happens, if you think about why many of us do rituals, it's like I brush my teeth and shower so that I feel ready to leave the house and go to work.
Right.
So we're doing the ritual in the service of some goal. What can happen with OCD is that you lose the link between why you were doing the ritual for the other goal, and the ritual itself becomes the goal. That it becomes rewarding in and of itself. So if you check to see if your door is locked when you leave for work in the morning, perfectly reasonable thing to do. So you're not going to be worried whether you left the door unlocked. But you're doing it in order to get to work and be able to function at work. If you're lost in checking the lock in order to check the lock, well, that's when we say the link is gone,
right.
And now maybe we need to think differently about it. So for sure, people vary quite a bit on where they are on the spectrum of are they ritualistic or are they not ritualistic? And I do think some people use them more or less in different domains of life.
Interesting. Do we get more ritualistic as we get older?
What's been your experience?
It's a good question. I think that the rituals in my own life have become more codified and conventional as I've gotten older. Certainly my religious life has gotten more organized and conventional as I've gotten older. I start every day more or less the same way. If I'm home, I get up before dawn. This is a time that in Indian culture is called Brahma Muhurta, which is the creator's time, always before, when it's still dark. And I exercise, and I go to Catholic Mass every morning. That's how I start my day. And then I make coffee. I mean, I'm a case study in your book, practically, right? And that has
So it's
become
like 12 rituals by 7 a.m. basically.
Yeah. And it's important to me for lots and lots of reasons. Not the rituals per se, but what I'm actually doing during the rituals. Is that a function of age, and is it typical?
There's this interview with a mom that I came across who says, she's complaining about her son, and she says, my son rejected all of our practices. You know, every holiday, every religious thing, just didn't want to have anything to do with it. But she says at the end, but now as he's gotten older and had his own family, he's coming back to some of the traditional ways. And you do see that quite often. So if you think, even in the US, if you think about Thanksgiving, when you're a kid, it just arrives. You know, you just wake up and all this stuff's happening and there's turkey and you don't have anything to do with it. Then when you're a teenager, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I have to go to this stupid thing. Maybe we can skip it. And then in your 20s, you're like, I don't know about this. Then your 30s, 40s, when you have your own kids, all of a sudden you're like, I guess we should probably do Thanksgiving, and maybe we should make that pie, you know, that we had when we were kids, right? We should probably have that. And everybody says, yeah, let's have that. So you do see this like weaving in and out of ritual for different moments in life. When you have your own kids, you think, maybe we should build more things in, a sense of tradition, a sense of history, a sense of a family. When you're on your own, you say, I don't have time for that. You know, and I don't even like turkey, so why would we even bother?
Nobody likes turkey, by the way. It's just one day a year you feel like you need to eat it.
Isn't it very confusing?
Yeah. You have all the data. You probably have the best data in the world on the practice of rituals. what are the demographic patterns beyond age that you find? Do you find, for example, that you would typically think that politically conservative people are more ritualistic than politically liberal people, for example, or anything else along those lines?
We don't tend to see, so what you can see with personality types, for example, or with political beliefs, you can see that the manifestation is quite different.
Huh.
So you'll see pockets of rituals. And even if you think about the tools that you use for your rituals.
Yeah.
So for example, like if you think of who does yoga, it's often a certain type of person that is interested in yoga. If you think of people who are interested in hunting, it might be a different type of person. But each of those people, you know, if you're a hunter and you use guns, you develop rituals around guns, and you develop, you know, my grandfather did this, and I'm passing it down to you. With yoga, you can say there's a history of this, I'm passing it down to you. So there's even as we see people sort, often in predictable ways, like, oh, I would expect more liberal people to do that kind and more conservative people to do that kind. Even when they sort on that, it's like the level isn't different.
They're all going to do something.
Yeah, we're just ticking a different kind of. And even people, you know, you can think of people who are very religious engage in more rituals than people who aren't religious. They definitely engage in more religious rituals if you're religious, but it's not clear that you engage in more rituals if you're religious, as opposed to you just come up with your own coffee ritual in the morning that's not religious, but for you it's still doing something for you.
Interesting. So you and I counsel a lot of young people, and we're social scientists, so we're supposed to have something to say that's prescriptive and not just descriptive about human behavior. The average student that we teach is 28 years old. I get the question all the time, what's the best way to start your day? And they're asking that question to me because they want to know what's the best way to start your day so you're going to have a happy day. You have the highest likelihood of having a happy day. I teach happiness, so I got to have something to say. What do you say about how to build a set of rituals? Now, I give you an example of how this was done. In 2005, at the University of Texas at Austin, the most famous graduation speech was ever delivered, or one of the most, certainly in the last 30 years. Graduation speeches are all terrible. They're all two pieces of advice. Go find a job that you love and you'll never work a day in your life. Or go save the world, no pressure. They're boring, right? This was Admiral McRaven, a US Navy admiral, who gave a speech called Make Your Bed. That was his speech. You want to win tomorrow, first day after graduation, get up and make your bed. And what was he saying, Mike?
Make your bed?
That's not what he was saying.
It's funny because he wasn't just saying make your bed and then lie on it again and take a nap. There was some implication about what you should do after you.
And what was he saying? He was saying you're going to have a better day if what?
If you start with like a regular, for him it was a little bit about like a controlled behavior that you did every day that was about getting things done. And then the idea is if you start with a getting things done thing, now you're a getting things done person and you can kind of live your day like that. I'm not sure if we have the evidence to say that making your bed necessarily turns you into a different person, but we do see that when people have their morning way, and it's incredibly variable, which is quite important, right? I mean, if we had discovered in our research that like if you wake up in the morning and clap 6 times and then have coffee and then stomp 4 times, you will be amazingly happy, I would have like a cult. I mean, I wouldn't be here. I'd be like, you know what I mean? That's not how they work though, right?
You actually do have a cult.
I do have a cult, yeah. Yeah, in the back. But you know, that's not how we work because it has to be specific to us often. When we develop our own, it has to have some resonance with who we are. Yeah. So there isn't, unfortunately, we can't find rituals that are just like cookie cutter where I know that they'll work for everybody. It doesn't typically how they work. It's like whatever you develop as your own little thing. But people say if I can do my thing my way in the morning, I feel much more ready to face the day. And if it gets disrupted, they feel like I'm not ready to face my day.
That's good advice.
Yeah, so don't ever live with anybody because they will disrupt your rituals. And don't really talk to anybody either because they'll probably ruin it also. So you really want to be very careful with your own rituals and make sure you can enact them.
Don't live with anybody and don't talk to anybody. This is not the best advice for happiness. Before we go back to any questions that I have, we have our first question from the audience. Mike is yours.
I wanted to ask, how do you create a ritual to serve a particular need that you have? For example, if you're nervous before a performance, like some people create rituals of their own, but how do you find one that fits your particular needs and that would fit with you? Because you said that's important.
Do you have one that you do?
That's what I'm asking. How do I create one?
This is the Harvard Business School, and all we do is ask questions. We never actually answer any questions. It's just the way it goes over here. So how do you feel before you're about to perform? Give me a sense of the...
Anxiety, stress, all of the very nice emotions.
Okay. And is the mind racing?
Yeah.
Okay. So the key is just actually to say to yourself, calm down, and it will magically calm you down. That's a joke. That was a joke. It doesn't work at all.
I even tried breathing techniques. Nope.
Yeah. You should never, in fact, my colleague Alison Wood Brooks would say, you should never tell yourself to calm down, because humans aren't made that way. It would be amazing if we were built like that, but we're not. If I could just be like, you know what, feel happy. And then I could feel happy, it'd be like, oh my God, what a great life. We don't do that. We can't calm ourselves down like that. So people do often use rituals to do this, but what I would say is, when the mind is, this is what the research shows, when the mind is racing, it's just like, I'm gonna bomb, I'm gonna bomb, I'm gonna bomb. When people do rituals, one of the things that they help them with is literally just, if you're focused on your thing, you can't race as much. You're almost blocking yourself from racing because you're doing your specific thing that you're gonna do. And so we don't often see like, the way to do it is, do this and then do this and then do this. So that's kind of like up to you. I can tell you mine before I teach is bizarrely, I always write out my teaching plan on a yellow lined piece of paper. I don't write on yellow lined paper ever, except this specific time. I write out what I'm gonna do. And it's in a black leather binder that my dad gave me 25 years ago. And for me, then I'm like, I'm ready to go. I only do it when I teach MBA students. Any other talk, I couldn't care less for some reason. MBA students, I do this. So I would just say, like literally play with things and see what's the thing that helps you a little bit stop with the racing and see if you can kind of get a little bit out of it. And I wish I had like stomp 3 times and then snap and then you'll be there. We don't tend to see that that's how it works.
Is there any particular question I need to ask myself to figure it out? The ritual?
Like...
I don't know.
Yeah.
Any intrusive but psychological question?
Oh, I see, yeah.
Works.
Many people use a liquid.
Don't like
honestly.
alcohol. They give me headaches.
Yeah, like tea or coffee, or people often have a little, it could just be water, a little thing that they do with some sort of environment and see what might resonate with you or not.
One way that a lot of performers actually will deal with performance anxiety before they go on is that they will interrogate their own preparation by saying, have I done the most that I possibly can to be ready for this moment? Yes, I have. And what that does is that lowers the sense of tension a great deal because it lowers the sense of responsibility. Look, the performance is going to be what the performance is going to be, but the preparation is there. And that interrogation is really important because, of course, it holds you to your own standard. If you're not prepared, it can make you a lot more stressed out. But presumably you are prepared. Presumably you are prepared going into it. That's what a lot of professional athletes and professional musicians will actually do. Have I prepared the best that I can for this moment? And if I have, which ordinarily the answer is yes, then suddenly the level of tension really falls dramatically. We got time for one more, and then I'm going to close because it's dinner time.
I'm not sure if your research may have touched on this, but do you feel that racists cling on to a ritual belief that keeps them from freeing themselves from racism? And how do you train them to have a different belief if it is a ritual?
Arthur, you want to tackle that one?
Yeah, that's right. Or look, any set of beliefs that are pathological, can they be part of a ritual kind of thinking?
One of the things that if you look, for example, when apartheid ended, and the question is how do you bring together people in a country that have such a history of hatred and violence, this is not a magical solution, I don't mean it like that, but one of the things that you see is, so when South Africa created a Truth and Reconciliation Committee, one of the things that they did was they would start every single trial or every single hearing with a ritual. And in fact, one of the things they did was if the victims were present, who were going to testify about what had happened, each commissioner would file by and shake the hands of each person, each victim who was there, and then they would start the ceremony. And actually, many, many times you see when groups have been in conflict, one of the things that people will try to do is take elements of a ritual from each culture and see if they can create some kind of a hybrid ritual that we can engage in together as and I want to be clear, as a very, very initial starting point. Of course, it doesn't, solve the larger problem, but I do think there's a role for rituals sometimes in pulling people together with something in common rather than everything being so far apart.
I think the most empowering thing for me in reading this book, hearing this conversation, but particularly reading the book, which I urge all of you to go read the whole book, because this has just been a sample of the richness in it, was that rituals can help each of us to decide to be the person that we want to be, notwithstanding our feelings. It's really incredible. We live so much from moment to moment according to the feelings that we have, and we're blown from feeling to feeling as if we were creatures of the limbic system. And rituals are an entirely conscious way of saying, this is the person that I'm going to be. And it reminded me that, for example, there was this, one of the greatest psychologists who's ever lived, social scientist, was
me.
was William James, who in 1890 was, it's like here, we like to say our colleague William James.
That's right.
He was a professor in psychology and philosophy here in the late 19th century. And he talked about acting like the person that you wanted to be, and you would become that person. Rituals that are healthy and good and loving and kind and dignified of us can make us those people. And that's a big takeaway I took from your book. If you're not feeling love for your wife, send her flowers, right? If you don't feel religious.
Is that hypothetical?
If you, I have one-touch ordering on 1-800-Flowers. If you don't feel religious, go worship. That's the point. A ritual will make you the person that you want to be. So that was helpful. And I think that ultimately, this is a key to us living into the world that we want it to be by acting in a way that demonstrates the values that we want to hold. I'm going to give you the last word.
I love that idea, and I think that one thing that can be interesting and valuable is, so there's this question of, should I add more rituals, which I think is interesting to play with, but there's also just a sense of recognize the ones you're already doing. So just observe yours. If you don't think you have any, ask your spouse or your roommate or your coworkers, and they'll be like, oh no, you have a lot, and here's what they are, so you can learn a lot. But when you see the ones that you're doing already, you can kind of own them a little bit more. So the next time you do the thing, it's almost as if you laugh to yourself a little. You have this flash of self-recognition, like, oh my God, we're doing the silverware thing again. And I think that in and of itself is worthwhile, that you're looking at what you're doing and kind of embracing it a little bit more so that it becomes a little bit more resonant and a little bit more meaningful for you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in congratulating and thanking Mike Norton.
Thank you, Ivan.
Thank you.
Thank you.